rather cloudy elsewhere. And that is how the weather is shaping up for you this Tuesday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News. After a remarkable 2 weeks in British history, politics is back, and that means the briefing is back too. It's back with a vengeance, with busy times ahead. Liz Truss is in New York, and a busy parliamentary calendar is planned for the next 4 days. We're going to dissect it all with a series of experts and decision makers after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 9:31. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The new Prime Minister says negotiations for a post-Brexit free trade deal with the US will not restart for years. Liz Truss is in New York for the first time as PM, where she'll hold bilateral meetings with world leaders at the United Nations General Assembly. It's understood she'll speak about energy as well as the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Prime Minister has also pledged to give at least £2.3 billion in military aid to Ukraine next year. Liz Truss says the UK will match or exceed the record support given to President Zelensky's troops in their fight against Russian aggression. About 6 million people with disabilities will receive a one-off payment of £150 today. The money is part of a package of support to help those struggling with the cost of living crisis. Most people who are eligible can expect the financial boost at the start of October. Madeleine McCann's parents have lost a case against a former Portuguese policeman who alleged they were involved in their daughter's disappearance. The European Court of Human Rights ruled they were given a fair trial in Portugal in their libel case against the detective. The court says any reputational damage was the result of local police making the couple official suspects rather than the officers' claims. The royal household is now observing a week of mourning following the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. Members of the royal family aren't expected to carry out official duties, and flags at royal homes will remain at half-mast. Buckingham Palace says it's King Charles's wish to observe this period. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to the briefing with Tom Harwood.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:34 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and radio. Welcome back to politics. Well, before we dive right in, let me say what a privilege it has been to play a small part in covering a remarkable moment in our history. A moment that to some extent has brought the country together and allowed us to both commemorate a remarkable woman, a remarkable life lived, and celebrate our unique and profound national story together. It's something that so many of us will never forget. And thank you for being a part of it, with amazing contributions, views and stories that GB News viewers have been sending in across the past 2 weeks. But now the period of national mourning is at an end, and politics returns at pace. Indeed, in the wake of the death of Her Majesty, the Department for Digital, Media, Culture and Sport has overseen the organisation of the events around the country. This department is under very new management, and I'm delighted, firstly, to be joined in this first show back by Michelle Donnellan, the Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, as of 2 weeks ago exactly. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I suppose the first big question is the events of the last 10 days that your department has been responsible for overseeing. Did they go as planned? Was it always the plan to have this remarkable queue snaking through central London?
Good morning. Yes, indeed. You know, some of these plans have been in process for years, and then we have obviously stress tested them and worked them up and challenged them over the last few days, and then put them into action as well. And we saw it was remarkable. I completely share your sentiment this morning. It was incredible to see so many people queue up, some of them for up to 24 hours at a time, to get their opportunity to say goodbye and to mourn our late Majesty, the Queen. And of course, I want to say a massive thank you to all of the partners that made it possible: the police, St John's Ambulance, the volunteers, the Red Cross, the Samaritans, the endless list of partner organisations, the cafes, the restaurants, our partners down the South Bank, who all stayed open really late so that people could access the facilities. It was a team effort, I would say.
And how many people are we roughly thinking joined this queue in the end? Is there a specific figure, or do we learn that later?
Yeah, so we will be publishing the figure properly in due course. We're crunching those numbers, but we think it's about 250,000 people. And of course, there were also individuals that laid flowers in the parks, that waited at the barriers to watch the royal family at the vigil, that watched on the BBC Red Box the laying in state, or that participated in their local events. So there was so much going on in the last 10 days to mark the Queen's incredible service and duty over 70 years, not just the queue.
Yeah, really, really profound moment. But of course, Parliament is back this week, and there's a very busy calendar for this new government. There's much reporting that there's to be a policy blitz, not just of new policy, but also of changed policy. And one of those promises that Liz Truss made in her campaign to become Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister was to change the online safety bill, what had been known as the online harms legislation, something that would make a provision for a peculiar sort of legal but harmful status of banned material online that could be legal offline. Is that changing?
So first of all, I want to be clear, our overriding objective with the online safety bill, and the reason why it was in the manifesto in the first place, is because our legislation does have to keep pace with changes and technology. And at the moment, you know, I would argue that children and young people aren't necessarily safe when accessing some platforms where it is user generated. And that's why we've seen some horrendous and heartbreaking incidences. And that's why it needs to be changed. So that is not going to be edited within the bill, just to reassure your viewers. The bit that you point out about the element in relation to adults, about free speech, we are going to change, because we need to make sure that we get that balance right there.
As a principle, do you believe that something that is legal online illegal offline should be legal online? Should there not be a difference between the online world and offline world when it comes to what we can do and say?
I think we need to make sure that our laws are common sense and that they are easy to understand and that they translate between the online world and the in-person world. And this is something that we will be changing within the legislation, as the Prime Minister has already spoken about. And my priority is to do that and get this legislation back into the House and make sure it becomes law so that we're protecting young people and children up and down the country and giving confidence to their parents as well.
Just at the risk of getting into the weeds of this, already the Commons stages of the legislation have gone very far through. Will the legislation need to be pulled and reintroduced, or is this going to be done through amendments, perhaps in the House of Lords?
So we will be able to make the changes without reintroducing the bill. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that these changes would drastically delay the passage of the bill. That's not the case. There is a process to do this, and we'll be coming forward with the legislation as soon as we possibly can. It is one of my number one priorities.
Just finally in this conversation about the online harms legislation, it does seem, and this might sound a little bit indelicate, but perhaps there's a difference in between what a 17-year-old teenager might be able to comprehend online and what a much younger child might be able to comprehend online. And some of the preclusions around that might, to some people, seem a little censorious. Is there no wiggle room at all about, for example, a 17-year-old who might be wanting to I don't know, look at illicit material, for example, something that might be described as 18 plus, and we do know what particularly teenage boys can be like. Is there a risk that over-policing this might send people to the dark web, to illegal areas, rather than keeping things above board?
No, I mean, and we shouldn't, as a government, be condoning what is illegal. If you're not 18 yet, then you shouldn't be accessing content of that nature. We need to remember that. And also, we've heard some horrific stories of people accessing suicide forums, of getting content on social media groups that is drastically inappropriate for their age group, and it can have devastating consequences because it can influence young people and children who are not of an age that should be looking at that content. And this government is responsible, decisive, and that's why we're going to bring forward this legislation to protect children and young people under the age of 18. But we will be amending the legislation. I agree with you that some of the elements of this bill in relation to adults and free speech, the balance isn't quite right. And as you will see in the coming weeks, this is a government that are not afraid to make the bold decisions and the bold choices, but also we're not afraid to revisit things if we think that they're not in the interests of the public at large.
So that's really clear there, just a binary choice. When you turn 18, it's more of a free internet, and before that it will be more restricted. Let's move on to the BBC licence fee, because this is something that has been brought up again and again. And you've been saying that potentially a review is what's needed here, potentially one in fairly short order. What is going to happen? What can happen to the BBC licence fee before charter review?
Yes, so as you point out, there is a very strict timetable on this, but we have already spoken of a review of the BBC. And for one thing, we need to make sure that the BBC is sustainable in the long term in a modern age when the media landscape has changed drastically, and how people consume media has also changed drastically. And as it'll be no secret that I have been a long-term sceptic of the current funding model via the licence fee. So I do think it's important that we look at this. We look at all the options, and we make sure that we review this with the public having a say as well.
It could actually put the BBC on a firmer footing, potentially with more funding, if it moves to some sort of subscription-based model, in the way that I know many of my contemporaries don't pay a licence fee, but do pay for Netflix, for Amazon Prime, for Disney+. If the BBC was a global brand like that, could it actually be on a firmer financial footing?
I think I'm not going to pick one particular model that the BBC should go down here today on your show, because that's the purpose of a review and thrashing this out. But you're quite right to point out that there are other ways of making sure that the BBC can be more sustainable in the long term, and that could indeed put it on a firmer footing. I completely agree with you.
To that, there's another media company, of course, Channel 4, that a privatisation of which was announced not so long ago. Now, it seems like your department is taking steps back from that. What's the rationale there to review that case when the British government hasn't privatised anything since the coalition era? Is it really going to be the case that the Liz Truss administration is the one that walks away from privatisation?
So I think, the Prime Minister was very clear that we need to review the business case for this. That's what I'll be doing. As a politician, I always make my decisions based on evidence and listening to people. We've got to make sure that this is the right decision for the public purse strings and in the long term for the sustainability of Channel 4. So I am currently looking at the business case, and I will update you as soon as I can.
Well, it's an incredibly busy in-tray that you have. After only 2 weeks in the job, just finally in this conversation, Michelle Donnellan, I've got to ask you, what's it been like to be thrust into this role at such a remarkable time in British history with such a full and busy in-tray?
Well, it has been unique, shall we say, and very different to the normal way that you would start as a minister. But it's also been a complete privilege and honour to play a part in the last 10 days and do my bit to help the nation to remember a remarkable monarch who arguably was one of the greatest monarchs we've ever had.
Well, Michelle Donnellan, what a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing this morning. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, we were discussing there some of the busy things to come this week, and let's run through a quick list of them now. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, is in New York at the moment. She flew in last night for the UN General Assembly. There, alongside the major meetings, she'll meet with President Biden and President Macron in formal bilaterals. And then tomorrow, we'll hear more on the government plans to help businesses with the cost of energy. Business Secretary Jacob Rees-Mogg is expected to announce rapid legislation. And on Wednesday, we're tipped to hear about an announcement from the Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, on how the NHS can get through the difficult winter ahead. That's Thursday, I should have said. And Friday will be the biggest parliamentary day of the week, with a mini-budget defining the Truss administration's economic agenda, spearheaded, no doubt, with tax cuts. And it doesn't stop this coming weekend as the Labour Party conference gathers in Liverpool. The Conservatives meet for their own conference the following week. In short, nobody in politics has time to catch their breath. Well, let's digest this all now with Nigel Nelson, the political editor at the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People. And Nigel, it feels like there's basically no time to sleep for government ministers, for political journalists, for parliamentary staff. Parliament's just gone from being the eyes of the world to a pretty busy workshop in the next 4 days.
Yes, I'm wondering how I'm going to get some sleep over the next 2 weeks. That's absolutely right. I think that there was no alternative to the fact that Liz Truss did have to hit the ground running. That because of 10 days of official mourning, that she lost momentum, which normally new prime ministers get, and suddenly she got to pack all these things into a few days. So she'd only just read a lesson at the Queen's funeral yesterday when she'd had to fly off to New York for the United Nations summit. And that's going to be an interesting one. She's going to have to explain to President Macron, for a start, whether he's a friend or foe. She's also got bilateral meetings with Ursula von der Leyen in charge of the EU, when they've really got to sort out what they're going to do about the Northern Ireland Protocol, because, of course, we don't get a trade deal with America until that has actually been put to rest. And she's got another meeting with President Biden tomorrow, when I'm sure all that will come up.
Interesting that Liz Truss said yesterday to lobby journalists that she wouldn't be prioritising a US trade deal in the short term. I wonder if this is a particularly canny move from her. It allows her sort of the space to have meetings with President Biden without the consequence of all of those meetings, as they were under the previous two prime ministers, being journalists just asking, has the trade negotiations started yet? Where have you got to? What about chlorinated chicken? Sort of all of that noise won't be there in her initial relationship with Biden. And that might be a politically savvy move.
I'm not sure that's quite right, Tom, because I mean, we were told during the Brexit campaign that a trade deal with America was an absolute shoo-in. It would be a complete doddle. There'd be no problems about it. And Liz Truss has been left in the position where she just simply can't do it if she starts trying to tear up the Northern Ireland Protocol. So while America is saying the two things are not directly linked, they're certainly indirectly so. So if we end up turning around to Europe and saying we're going to abandon the protocol unilaterally, despite signing a treaty saying we would go along with it, then America is unlikely to start giving us any preferential treatment when it comes to trade deals. So at the moment, the dilemma the Prime Minister faces is which does she consider more important, sorting out Northern Ireland that'll work both for the mainland and for the province, or is the trade deal with America more important? Now, she's obviously decided she'll allow that to go on the back burner while Northern Ireland gets itself sorted out.
Yes, I suppose it does show an optimism that it will be sorted out, although I suppose going back to the 2016 arguments, the US still doesn't have a trade deal with the EU. They don't look particularly close to doing a deal with the EU. I wonder if even though this delay has been set about whilst those domestic issues are thrashed out, perhaps the UK will get a deal with the US before the EU does in any case.
Well, it may do. I mean, certainly when President Trump was there, he seemed to be very keen on the whole thing. President Biden less so. But yes, you might be right that, I don't think a trade deal with the US is an impossibility. What I do think is that the difficulty comes down to how you actually rip up a treaty you've just signed with the EU. And this really goes back to one of the biggest problems, I think, during the referendum campaign, is that nobody put any thought into what might happen after Brexit at the part of the UK that has a land border with the EU. And extraordinarily, we're some years on now from that, and we still haven't got a solution. You can understand that the EU wants to keep the integrity of the single market. That's what it's there for. So there was always going to be a major problem. Now, it may be there is a solution there. Maybe the EU can bend a bit, that actually we won't have all these cross-border checks which are causing the problem. But it is a difficult one to solve, and it would have been pretty good if they tried to solve it at the beginning rather than at the end.
Yes, I think that sequencing of the trade talks where Northern Ireland would be sorted first and then the trade would come secondly, that sequential deal that was agreed by Theresa May in December 2017 really did scupper a lot of that negotiation because, of course, you can't really sort a border unless you sort the trade first. But there we are, running over history. I wonder if this will create a political impetus to get it done sooner. For now, Nigel Nelson, thank you so much for joining us on the briefing this morning. Let's finally today talk through this United Nations General Assembly. What does it all mean? Well, I'm joined now by Sir Mark Lyle-Grant, the UK Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations from 2009 to 2015. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Sir Mark. Firstly, what is a UN General Assembly for? Is it just a talking shop?
Well, the UN General Assembly, this high-level segment that happens every September, is an opportunity for all the heads of state and government in the world to come together and go for high-level meetings and also have bilaterals with each other. It's been compared to a sort of speed dating event, really, where you have these 20-minute, half-an-hour bilaterals with a whole series of different heads. It's a very valuable opportunity to get diplomatic business done in one place at one time. That's the main, really, purpose of this week.
Getting those people in that same place, I suppose that can spark agreements, although are we expecting anything specific to be agreed this week, or just sort of alliances to be emboldened, conversations perhaps to be started?
I don't think this year it's such a massive event that it's going to be some big climate deal or some big sustainable development deal. No, I think the big issues this week are going to be Ukraine, obviously. In terms of conflict, there's a meeting in the Security Council on Thursday, which James Cleverly will represent the UK at, which will be very important. But there'll be climate change, there'll be humanitarian relief efforts, particularly after what we've seen in Pakistan, and there will be a lot of side meetings on climate. But I think for Liz Truss, it's more about the bilaterals and her main speech, her first speech as Prime Minister, to the global community on Wednesday.
Really profound moment there, and potentially a chance for her to cast herself as this global figure, although as a former Foreign Secretary, she will be familiar with this process. I wonder to what extent the UK will get any agreements here, particularly when it comes to the international food security crisis, when it comes to international coalitions and support for Ukraine matching UK support. Are there particular wins that the UK is after right now, or is this all about mood music?
I think it's more about mood music. It's about Liz Truss setting out her stall. I mean, yes, it's true that she went to last year's meeting as Foreign Secretary, but this is her first overseas trip as Prime Minister. So it will be an important moment, her speech, because rather as Boris Johnson decided to put climate and then technology as his sort of main themes of his international governance, it'll be up to Liz Truss to say, where is my focus going to be? My guess is that she'll be very heavily about liberty and freedom and democracy and supporting Ukraine against the autocracies of Russia and China, etc. That'll be her focus. But she's got these bilaterals.
And just finally, it was only a couple of days ago that the UN voted to allow President Zelensky of Ukraine to deliver a speech this week. How important is this as a moment to see really that the Russian influence doesn't really extend much beyond Cuba or Syria and the handful of countries that voted to block it?
Well, President Zelensky, of course, has every right to speak at the General Assembly. He's president of Ukraine, which was actually one of the 40-odd founding members of the United Nations. So it was sort of independent presence at the UN since 1945. So, of course, Russia tried to block it happening, but they had no chance of success and got very little support. No, this is an opportunity for President Zelensky also to set out exactly what is going on in his own country and try and persuade some of the waverers, the big countries that are sitting on the fence, like India and Brazil and others, to come and more in support of Ukraine.
Really interesting goings on in New York there. We'll keep a keen eye on it. But for now, Sir Mark Lyle-Grant, thank you so much for talking through exactly what the UN General Assembly, or UNGA, as it's sometimes known, really means. Thanks for your time. Well, that's it on The Briefing this morning. Thank you for your company. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9:30 in what is turning into a remarkably busy week in British politics. Coming up next, it's To The Point, but before then, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking dry for many this afternoon, but breezy with some drizzly rain in the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Well, starting off in the southwest, and here any mist and fog patches will clear by lunchtime to leave a dry but often cloudy afternoon, feeling warm in any sunny breaks. It's a similar picture across the southeast, where it will be dry and fine this lunchtime with some bright or sunny breaks developing. In South Wales, once any mist and fog clears this morning, it will be dry through the rest of the day, with temperatures getting into the high teens Celsius. And whilst it will be mostly dry across the Midlands, as we head into the afternoon, there is a chance of some isolated showers. These will be mostly light and many will stay dry. There's also the chance of 1 or 2 showers in the northeast. Here it may perhaps be a little brighter than elsewhere, but there will still be quite a bit of cloud. In the north and west of Scotland, it will be a damp afternoon with some drizzly rain. Elsewhere, it's looking mostly dry but quite cloudy with the odd shower. Meanwhile, in Northern Ireland, the best of any brightness this afternoon will be towards the southeast with thicker cloud and perhaps a little rain at times in the northwest. So little change through the afternoon with drizzly rain in the northwest, mostly dry but rather cloudy elsewhere. And that is how the weather is shaping up for you this Tuesday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all,